Our nation's founders gathered in taverns to enjoy lively conversation over a local brew, and so do we. It's a special Pints and Politics edition of River to River, presented by the Gazette and Iowa Public Radio. I'm Ben Kiefer.
And I'm Zach Kacharski. All right, tonight's panel. It's time to meet the panel. Tonight we have Gazette columnist and Insights editor Todd Dorman, columnist Althea Cole, as well as Des Moines Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton. Welcome, everybody.
I don't know about you, Zach, but I didn't expect this many cheery, smiling faces in Lynn County at this gathering here. Did you hear coming in, people here, if you're a Democrat, you've got a 3-pint limit. We do allow drowning of sorrows, but, you know, there has to be a limit to that. All right, enough of that.
I think they've all picked what countries they're going to live in, and they're excited about that. Portugal, yay!
They've had a lot of rain lately. I'm not sure.
Right.
A few minutes ago, a gentleman munching on, I think, a hamburger over here passed by me. I must have had a look in my eye, and he said, I don't have a question for you. I don't have an intelligent question. I just want to know what happened. And I said, Steve, that is an intelligent question. So that is the first question for our panel. What happened?
Trump won.
Very good. Okay, now we've digested the news flash there from Althea.
Hey, you put those on the tee. I'm going to swing. Sorry.
Exactly.
I mean, we know some answers. We have some data, but there's still answers yet to be answered. I mean, without traditional exit polling in Iowa, to answer a lot of the questions I think people have, we're going to have to wait on more detailed data about turnout in the state. That more demographic data, age breakdown, gender breakdown, et cetera, to really kind of dive into what happened and what changed compared to the last cycle. But as you've probably seen and has been reported by national outlets and other outlets, I mean, essentially what happened is worries about everyday expenses and the economy trumped concerns about reproductive freedom, abortion rights, and the protecting democracy. And so in key states, Trump's voters saw illegal immigration as well as imposing new costs on their communities. Many believed that their own financial well-being was at risk after the burst of post-pandemic inflation. And Trump, decisively won among voters who said that their family finances were falling behind. Voters, while they may not like Donald Trump and don't think he's honest and trustworthy, they think that he's a strong leader and wanted someone to come in and kind of disrupt the system, shake things up. They felt that things were going badly and the country was headed in a wrong direction, and they wanted a change from the Biden-Harris administration. And Trump made inroads among lower-income voters, both lower-income and middle-income voters, as well as voters without college degrees, based off of information from the Associated Press VoteCast. All those groups appeared to put as high a priority, if not somewhat more so, again, on their family budgets. And Harris and Iowa Democrats bet on rallying voters around abortion rights, and that didn't pan out as planned. Harris had relative strength with college students and higher income voters, but Trump held on to his base and also made marginal gains in some of Democrats' core constituencies, including among union members. Speaking to reporters yesterday, Eastern Iowa Republican Congresswoman Marionette Miller-Meeks, who, as of now, has a narrow 799-vote lead over Democrat Christina Bohannon in a race that the Associated Press has yet to call and Bohannon has yet to concede. But she criticized Bohannon and Democrats for being tone deaf to voters' concerns, whereas she argued Republicans were in tune with what people were most concerned about, and said that they were offering not platitudes, but policy provisions that they felt would make Iowans and Americans' lives better. That include reduced reducing gas prices by increasing domestic energy production, opening leases for oil and gas exploration and development on lands controlled by the federal government, closing the southern border, extending tax cuts authorized by Trump in 2017 that are slated to expire next year, and lowering prescription drug costs and pushing passage or an extension of the Farm Bill to help Iowa farmers and the state's agricultural industry. Harris did focus on reducing everyday costs for Americans, including anti-price gouging measures, but the majority of American voters, I guess, were left unconvinced. She couldn't shake her association with the Biden administration, which was unpopular, and most people polled throughout the U.S., again, felt that the country was on the wrong track, and inflation is really bad for an incumbent administration. Just ask Jimmy Carter. And so she wasn't able to shake that baggage. Again, whereas Trump won over frustrated voters with, promises that his fiery brand of America First economic populism and conservative culture would make their lives better. And, they bought into this image of Trump as a master deal maker. But he's going to be tested immediately, however. And as the Associated Press and many others have noted, there are reasons to believe that his plans for mass deportation and huge tariffs may actually hurt the very people who enabled his victory. And so now it's going to be on Trump and the Republicans to show whether they can deliver on this agenda.
Yeah, I know Zach has a question, but this being Lynn County, we have a lot of Democrats and left-leaning independents in this room who did not vote for Trump. Clap if you're willing to give the second Trump administration a chance. Okay, that's from Lynn County, Iowa. Zach, go for it.
So one of the things when you look at the turnout that you see is that rural Iowa turned out. And in terms of turnout also compared to past presidential elections, Harris did not perform as well in Scott County. And based on what you saw, what do you think drove that rural turnout so high? And was that something that you expected?
I think a lot of it was, it's not even just rural turnout that really did well for Iowa. It was all Iowans turning out to vote that really bode well for Trump. I worked for early voting, and we're going to discuss that later, but I was astounded at the number of people who came in to vote. And of course, we don't get to know how they vote. It's a secret ballot. That's one of the wonderful things about voting in the United States. But a lot were registering right on site to vote. First-time voters who are both young college students and immigrants. And normally I've been doing this for 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. In the 6 or 7 years that I've been working early voting, when I see somebody come in who appears to be, not a recently naturalized citizen, if they're going to register with a political party, they almost always register Democrat. So much so that if they check the box for Republican, we have to check those voter registration forms to make sure they're all completely filled out, because we don't want the ballot to be rejected if their registration is rejected for missing something on the form. So I look, and it's notable enough when they check the box for Republican, but I was astounded at the fact that after about a week, I realized I'd lost count at how many people who were naturalized citizens registering to vote for the first time in Lynn County, at least, checking the box to register as a member of the Republican Party, especially immigrants of color. It was something that stood out to me tremendously, and I realized, win or lose, Trump is going to make inroads with votes with these voters who he doesn't need to necessarily win those groups. He just needs to do a lot better than he did in 2020. And as we found, he did much better with all of those groups in 24.
I want to recognize Althea Cole here and all of those who worked at our polls. What a debt of gratitude we have to you. Let's hear it for the poll workers across our state and across the country. A follow-up for you, Althea. We know that former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, spent a lot of time leading up to the election laying the groundwork for his supporters not to trust the results if he lost. Did you hear from anyone at the polling station, early voting or anywhere, who was skeptical of the process and how the votes would be counted? Did you have to reassure people?
I like to offer general assurances ahead of time. I don't like to wait until it reaches that point where they start feeling distrustful. Not only did we have a lot of people voting for the first time if they were registering for the first time in Lynn County, we also had a lot of people who were longtime voters who were voting early for the first time. Republicans made massive gains in early voting turnout. I mean, we were taken aback. And given that, I got into the habit of asking people who were registering to vote, and even those who were, checking in, is this your first time voting early? And a lot of them said yes. And the reason I was asking that is because, I would take just an extra moment to explain why we were giving them a folder to put their ballot in. The answer, it keeps it secret when we pull it out of the envelope to count it on Election Day. A lot of people don't know that absentee is anything considered, or is considered anything that is not voted on Election Day. You're absent from your polling place on Election Day. So even if you're in person, you're voting absentee. They didn't know that they were counted on Election Day. So a lot of that really, really helped with trust in the process. We really didn't have any severe incidents where somebody was going to cause a disturbance or even, get a little mouthy with a poll worker because they weren't sure or weren't trusting that their vote would be counted. We didn't really have any of that.
No security issues that we've heard about from other parts of the country in your state, at your station?
We had deputy sheriffs on site, minimum 2 per location is what I noticed, and I got to say a lot of good stuff about Lynn County's deputies, because there were times when they didn't just stand around monitoring the place, making sure we were safe. They pitched in and helped us with things that they could help us with. So, we all felt safe. We never felt like we were in physical trouble. It was a really great experience early voting this year.
You're listening to a special Pints and Politics edition of River to River from IPR News in partnership with the Gazette, recorded yesterday evening, November 7th, at Big Grove Brewery in Cedar Rapids. I'm Ben Kiefer, back in just a moment with more. It's a special Pints and Politics edition of River to River from IPR News in partnership with the Gazette. I'm Ben Kiefer. Yesterday evening, we gathered in Cedar Rapids at Big Grove Brewery before a live audience. Our panelists, Gazette journalists Todd Dorman, Althea Cole, and Tom Barton. Gazette executive editor Zach Kucharski was my co-host. Let's get back to more highlights from the conversation.
One of the questions that exists now is, Trump is starting to put together an administration. I'm curious, are there names that you think are going to come to the top of the list for that out of Iowa? I know we've seen Matt Whitaker. His name has surfaced as a possible AG candidate. Are there others from Iowa that you think have a shot at that administration?
I guess I haven't really given a whole lot of thought to that. One name that comes to mind, and there was some talk and speculation about it because of her appearance in New York during Trump's criminal trial there. Republican Attorney General Brenna Byrd. There was speculation because of her defense of Trump during that trial that maybe she might be eyed for some position within the administration, whether that's Attorney General or some position within the Department of Justice. But it sounds like, from, I guess, the talk or the chatter that we're hearing now that Matt Whitaker is probably more likely of a candidate to be in consideration for that. I guess nobody else really comes to mind. Early on, before we got into the caucuses, there was, speculation chatter about whether Governor Kim Reynolds might be considered for a position within the administration, potentially within the Department of Education. But, given that, Governor Reynolds endorsed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the caucuses, and, the dust-up that caused with Trump, I don't know if she would be considered.
I think the Brenna Byrd federal appointment is an outstanding idea. I would offer generously to write a letter of recommendation, anything that would be needed to smooth her transition to the federal government.
Let's go to some questions here. I've got one. We've heard so much about Project 2025. This person in our audience here wants to know, which of Trump's promises actually have a chance of becoming reality? And we have so many here. Please comment. We've got mass deportations. We've got elimination of the education department. We've got an overhaul of the Affordable Care Act. What this questioner wants to know, what has a chance of passing? And that will depend, of course, on if the Republicans also have a majority in the U.S. House, right? Because then there are, for the president and the Republican Congress, Todd, no holds barred, are there?
I don't know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be really bad for the environment. I mean, the APA and that Project 2025 would be gutted. A lot of the scientists and experts and longtime regulators who might be irritating to the Trump administration will get their walking papers. I mean, they're even talking about, scrapping NOAA, and which, operates the National Weather Service, because we can get our weather from private companies, although they don't mention that all of those private companies use National Weather Service forecasts to base their own forecasts on, and all of the data that they collect. But they've said stuff about climate change that the Heritage Foundation folks don't like. So are they going to pass everything? No. But I think there are going to be these instances where, in the interest of large business interests, corporations, other people that need regulations erased to do what they want to do, I think the Trump administration is going to be very, very eager to do that, no matter, what the environmental or otherwise, what the consequences are.
Well, what about mass deportation and immigration? We know Iowa, as an ag state, depends on these types of workers. And we saw a poll commissioned by IPR and the Midwest Newsroom that immigration and concerns about the border were a big consideration for voters. Does the messaging that we heard and his success with it set the GOP majority in Iowa for more immigration legislation here this session, in this upcoming session?
They may pass stuff like they have in the past that's sort of punitive, but Iowa Republicans don't talk about Iowa Republicans who use undocumented immigrant labor, which is all...
It's very clear we need that labor.
So that's always there's, for public consumption, they're all, criminals, and they're carrying garbage bags of fentanyl, that would be better. Fentanyl, I love fentanyl. Fentanyl over the border, and to their donors and in the agricultural community, it's, there's no legislation aimed at shutting that pipeline down or punishing those companies for hiring those workers.
I wanted to ask a little bit about the poll that came out the weekend before the election. I'm curious, Jay Ann Seltzer had some, injected late optimism for Democrats, showing that Harris had a slight lead against Trump. What do you think that did in terms of turnout? Did that have an impact on Election Day? Or what impact do you think that had? And where do you go from here in terms of polling and fixing it?
I think it did have an impact, and Ann Seltzer, in the hours in day after the election, I believe acknowledged that in either her interview with the Des Moines Register or in a guest column that was published either yesterday or today, acknowledging that the poll, likely did probably, propel some Republicans who felt that Trump was going to safely, capture Iowa. How many people that turned out, how much of an impact that ultimately had, who knows?
Let me quote an email that I received this week on this topic. To quote it, I think the Des Moines Register and Ann Selzer owe us an explanation for their last-minute poll showing Harris with a big lead in Iowa. Was it an honest mistake, or was it a devious psychological ploy to win votes for the progressives? In fact, I am wondering about the need for the entire polling industry. It seems to me their polls miss the mark by more than the margin of error. Just how honest is their work? Asked this person who emailed me this week. Todd, Althea, weigh in on this poll that really, within minutes, went around the world to news outlets.
It went viral within minutes because it told us information that shocked us, but that doesn't mean that the poll was dishonest. I mean, is that email really implying that Seltzer is dishonest in her work? I
just read it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far. I'm sorry. I didn't have a problem with the poll because the moment I read it, I was like, is this accurate? You know, I don't want to impugn
And her track
Seltzer.
record has gone the other way to show that Trump in past elections has had strength, right? So,
Yeah, she's been, her polls, I should say, I'm not going to say she, her polls have mostly been very, very spot on. Not perfect, but I remember, 2014, she correctly predicted that Joni Ernst was going to overtake Bruce Braley in the GOP, or in the Senate race that year that Republicans took the Senate back from Democrats during President Obama's second term. She had Ernst over Braley, I think, by 7 points that Saturday night, and Ernst ended up winning by, I think, about 9 that year. Same thing in 2016. She had Trump ahead by a healthy margin, and sure enough, Trump won the state by a very similar healthy margin. 2020, there were no surprises. Early 2020, when there was a poll leading up to the Iowa Democratic caucuses, some might remember, there was an error in the manner in which the poll was conducted, because it was noticed actually by a poll respondent that one of the major candidates was left out. And so they, obviously that was going to cause a problem for the reliability of the results. This admittedly is a very significant, I don't want to call it error, because I don't know if they made any mistakes. But there does have to be some explanation for why this poll showed Kamala 3 points ahead, and then 2 nights later, Trump wins by, almost 14? That's a hell of a swing, not something that can actually be done in 2 days, in my opinion, or 3 days. But, I'm not interested in jumping to conclusions that there was, malfeasance or something devious about it. Sometimes the pollsters get it wrong. And although this was particularly unusual for Iowa, it is not the first poll that Trump has vastly outperformed. In fact, that was what caught everybody off guard in 2016 and even in 2020. Trump didn't win in 2020, but the polls still underestimated him, as they did in 2016. And I knew for weeks, because I was hearing it said for weeks, that if Trump outperforms the polls in 2024 like he does in 16 and 20, he's going to win. Not that he's going to do better than we think, he's going to win. And he did.
Yeah, I don't think the poll was dishonest. I don't need anyone to get to the bottom of it for me. I really don't. It's a private opinion poll. I don't think we need congressional hearings or anything to figure out what exactly happened, whether this was a devious plot to make, I guess, the poll look even really, really bad. But I just don't. I don't know. You should take polling with a grain of salt, no matter what. And if it shows you something astounding, you should probably be fairly wary that that's actually what's happening. And, Democrats got excited about it. I don't blame them. They need things to get excited about, because it's been tough several years. And, my daughter working on campaigns, she said they had a higher influx of volunteers and people to knock doors on after the poll came out. So there was some, people got fired up. In the end, it turned out to be totally wrong, and that's just the nature of political polling.
And I mean, to one of the questions in that listener's email, is there a purpose for polls? Well, yeah, because clearly we want to know what is in those polls, regardless of whether or not they turn out to be completely accurate. There's a demand for them. There's a market for them. And if they tell us what we want to hear, we love them. If they tell us things that make us nervous, they light a fire under us. If they tell us things we hate, well, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about it at Pints and Politics.
Well, and I mean, for all the diligent work registered political reporters did covering the campaign, that one poll story was what put the Register on the map in this election cycle. I mean, that's the power of the desire of people that want to know who's ahead in the horse race, and yeah, be either happy or outraged. So it filled that purpose.
The Cedar Rapids metro area made history by electing the first transgender lawmaker, Amy Wickendall, to the Iowa House, a Democrat. I talked with her this week. Now, my question, in a red wave election in the state, why do you think she was successful? I know she's a Hiawatha City Council member, long time, I think the longest serving Hiawatha City Council member. Now she'll represent the northern part of Cedar Rapids, Robbins, Hiawatha area, that area. Why was she successful? And what does that tell us about acceptance of transgender people as leaders in our society? Anything there?
Well, I think she was well known in that area, and well regarded. So that's a big part of it, is that she was a familiar name to people who live in the district. I think she ran a good campaign, and like a lot of the Democratic campaigns around the state, she probably had volunteers and people going out and knocking doors, kind of the traditional campaign. And her opponent was a newcomer who maybe people hadn't heard of, and he was kind of stuck to the Republican talking points for the most part. But I think it was mostly that they knew who she was. They'd seen her name on ballots before and figured that she could do a good job in the House.
I wanted to go back to something that we talked about a couple minutes ago, and that is, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds backed Ron DeSantis's effort ahead of the Iowa caucuses. Do you see that she also has the opportunity to appoint a lieutenant governor? Do you see that, or a desire to kind of change that relationship with President-elect Trump going to have an impact on the appointment of a lieutenant governor?
I don't think that's really going to be a motivating factor. I think, it's going to be more of a decision of what is Kim Reynolds' political future? Is she going to run for re-election? If so, it's going to be more a decision of what do I want in a running mate? Who do I want on the ticket with me that I think is going to help me and be beneficial to me in my chances of getting reelected to another term? Or conversely, if she decides that she's not going to seek reelection and, wants to retire or move on, do something else, it's going to be a decision of, okay, well, who do I want to kind of pass the torch to, right?
One of the reasons that Governor Reynolds was selected as lieutenant governor when Governor Terry Branstad came back to run for what ended up being 2 more terms was that he was looking for somebody who he could, really teach the ways of the office and the role and have a successor when it came time for him to leave office. And, Republicans back in 2015, 16, 17, just as Branstad was finally getting ready to leave to become the ambassador to China, we all marveled at how much time and care he took, making her ready for the role of governor when she did ascend to that role. So it's going to be that she's looking for in a lieutenant governor, and it's not going to be the relationship with Trump that impacts that. The state of Iowa, the Iowa State Fairgrounds, has been chosen as the place where Trump's going to hold the big 250th birthday celebration in 2026. We just learned that today. I mean, that's a big get for the state of Iowa, that they're going to have a huge fair of, all 50 states and, as Trump says, millions of visitors from around the world. That doesn't tell me that, Trump and Reynolds are real big enemies right now. It says the opposite.
We're going to take a short break. I'll let you refresh your drinks here at Big Grove in Cedar Rapids. Todd Dorman, Althea Cole, and Tom Barton of the Gazette. My co-host, Zach Kucharski, executive editor of the Gazette. I'm Ben Kiefer of Iowa Public Radio. It's a special Pints and Politics edition of River to River, brought to you by IPR and the Gazette. We'll let you stand up, stretch your legs, refresh your drinks, maybe get another burger. Thanks. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back with more of this special edition of River to River from IPR News and the Gazette, a partnership we have called Pints and Politics. You're listening to a recorded conversation with our panelists, a recorded Thursday evening at Big Grove in Cedar Rapids, and we took a short break. We're back now to get through as many really good questions from our audience here, about 100 people at Big Grove in Cedar Rapids. And we have on our panel Tom Barton, Deputy Des Moines Bureau Chief of the Gazette, Todd Dorman, Gazette columnist, opinion editor, Althea Cole, Gazette columnist. I'm so glad to be here with my co-host, Zach Kucharski, executive editor at the Gazette. Zach, I'll hand it to you. Let's get to those questions.
All right, we've got a stack. So, Elon Musk became a face seen alongside President-elect Trump at a variety of rallies. And so one of the questions from the audience is, how much of a role do you think Elon Musk will have during the Trump presidency? Is this something you think will be a commission type of job? Do you think he has any interest in being a full-time employee of the federal government, given his other interests?
Well, I mean, I've always thought that his role was going to be world domination. All he's got to do is steal a nuke and take all the gold out of Fort Knox and all that stuff, and his Bond villain plan will be complete. I don't know. I doubt he's going to have a formal role, because I can't see Elon Musk, filling out a employment application.
Wasn't he put forward as didn't Trump say he was going to be Secretary of Cost Cutting? Have a
Secretary of Cost Cutting.
a billionaire as the Secretary of Cost Cutting.
Well,
doesn't that make sense? He's got billions in government contracts, so let's...
Well, those won't get cut. That's not... he's not going to cut those.
You're just such a cynic.
He's a smart guy, I guess, and but I think I'd have better feelings about him if he hadn't bought Twitter and turned it into just a complete cesspool of white supremacy and hate. And boy, I've seen the change on the comments to my own tweets, and it's been a big change. Met a lot of new people that way.
Just following up on that thread, though, should people be concerned about, you have a billionaire and you have a president with interest in Truth Social, and you have Elon Musk with control of Twitter? Should people be concerned about that and what that could mean going forward?
Well, we're going to have to get our news from somewhere, right? After they change libel laws and sue us all into the dark ages, and after they, take the licenses away from the TV networks, I mean, we're going to have to find out somewhere what the weather's going to be, and what the dear leader said today, and what's going on. So, yeah, I think it's great.
You're dark after break, man.
Well, I'm just telling you what I think.
That's what this is all about. Let's go to another question from someone here at Big Grove in Cedar Rapids, writing down this question. How do Democrats change their messaging to appeal to more voters in Iowa and across the country? And an added question, did they miss on the, quote, threat to democracy messaging? Althea.
Oh, hell yes, they missed on the threat to democracy messaging so badly.
How did they miss? In what way?
Because not as many voters as they believed were actually afraid of the threat to democracy. I was having a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and I said, a nation that is of, for, and by the people cannot be saved by just one person, and it cannot be destroyed by just one person. And I mean, democracy is for everybody, but, it was just such a catastrophic message. It was Democrats catastrophizing. If you elect Trump, it'll be the end of the country as we know it. And a lot of us just had a really hard time taking that seriously, even those of us who were willing to ponder that in good faith. And I was willing to ponder that.
Let's
in
take
good
a poll
faith.
here. And, Democratic stronghold here, or preponderance of Democratic voters here. Althea just said that. Applaud if you are worried about a Trump administration taking apart the pillars of our democratic system.
Well, no, I don't think we should worry because he was just joking. I mean,
Hyperbole.
he was just joking when he talked about using the military or the Department of Justice to go after his political rivals. He was just joking when he talked about being a dictator for just a day, because all dictators just like to do it for a day.
Is it a joke, Althea? A hyperbole? What do you think of the mood in this room? People are worried about that.
The problem is the claims of democracy is over if we know it, or the guy's too similar to Hitler, or all that stuff. Those were so central to the Democrats' election messaging, and those who, I'm going to say, those who knew better than to believe it were like, if this is their messaging, they must think we're stupid. One thing I hate about how we've done elections over, the last 10 years especially, is that we have pathologized them so much. I always liked it better, and I'm not saying that it's always been this way 100% of the time, but to me, what makes elections interesting is the policy debates and what this candidate wants, what this candidate thinks needs to be changed in the country. I have always liked the boring stuff better than the really, really, really super dramatic stuff, because the super dramatic stuff is what gets so easily twisted out of context, or twisted, taken out of context. Project 2025 was a perfect example of that. We saw people making claims that just were absolutely false. The more research I did reading Project 2025 and comparing them to the claims that were made about them, I was like, you got one guy here writing a column saying that Project 2025 is advocating for getting rid of the Department of Commerce, and then I actually read everything that Project 2025 says about the Department of Commerce, and it basically compliments it as a department, saying, hey, a few reforms, and this could be a really well-run system and really central to the affairs of the operation of the government. Given that everything has been catastrophized, though, voters hear that message, and if it doesn't, resonate with their fears, if it does, frankly, they were probably already thinking of voting Democrat or already guaranteed to vote Democrat. But those moderates, those moderate Republicans, basically, anybody short of the, diehard MAGA crowd, and even them, they were like, if this is their message, sorry, I'm not buying it. Stop treating me like I'm stupid because it's not working, and clearly it didn't.
Well, I even got a little uncomfortable with the Democrats saying that Donald Trump was fascist to the core. Oh, wait, that wasn't a Democrat. That was his former chief of staff, a Republican. And there were a lot of other Republicans that said the same thing. Now, I realize that I don't really think that's taken out of context. I mean, the context was very clear. And, it's just, there's just, it's like now that he won, we're going to start, pretending that none of this stuff happened, and it did. There were things, and as far as policy is concerned, this is a president-elect who thinks that the federal government can raise revenue from tariffs, which nobody who knows anything about economics thinks that's true.
Wanted to switch gears a little bit, flip over to the State House. And so we saw Republicans expand majorities in the chambers. They've retained single-party control in the State House. What influence do you think that's going to have, as lawmakers gather in January? What do you think, they're going to feel that Tuesday's vote gave them the authority to do.
Yeah, we still don't know, but based off of what we've heard from lawmakers and from leadership these last two sessions and what their focus and priority has been, I would think that they would feel more emboldened to continue with their agenda or priority of continuing to cut taxes in Iowa, both continuing to cut the state income tax and maybe considering more changes or reforms to Iowa's property tax system. So we'll see some sort of proposal along those lines. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some other education reform proposal. I can't tell you at this point what that would entail, what they would go after, but we definitely know that the governor and that House and Senate Republicans are interested in continuing to reform the state's education system. We saw the education savings accounts, taxpayer funding to help families send their children to private schools. That's being phased in over 3 years. I don't know that we may potentially see something more along those lines. What? I don't know. I also wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see more legislation, geared toward the state's universities surrounding DEI programs, or something surrounding curriculum and going after what conservatives, feel to be, the term that they use, woke nonsense, and going after curriculum that they think is somewhat troubling or unnecessary. I mean, we've seen them put forward bills, specifying how teachers in classrooms should go about teaching government and civics and U.S. history, et cetera, and limiting lessons that they feel to be, troubling or what's the word I'm looking for?
Divisive?
Thank you. That's
Got
the
your
word I'm
back,
looking
Jack.
for.
Another question from one of the people here, sipping a pint, I assume. Is the American zeitgeist calling for a strong man?
The desire for a strong man to sort of come in and solve all of our problems, and as a bonus is very entertaining, was very appealing to a very large segment of Americans who, they don't think much of Congress, they don't think much of the institutions. Country's going in the right direction. Maybe they'll take a chance on this guy again. He can come in and only he can fix it, he says. And so,
right, and democracy,
give him a chance.
The way democracies decide is just messy and takes too long.
Yeah, and with each generation, we it seems like we lose a little bit more of folks who value the traditions and the institutions and the ways of democracy and see things a lot differently than we did, even 20 years ago.
I don't think Americans want a strong man so much as they just want a strong candidate. How many Iowans who voted for Trump also voted for Kim Reynolds, including the first time she was a full-fledged gubernatorial candidate when she was running against a man, a very well-funded man.
Kamala Harris was not a strong candidate, former prosecutor, district attorney.
She was not a strong candidate at all. Oh my God, she was a terrible candidate. It's kind of interesting. She was a terrible candidate.
Murmurs of disagreement from the crowd.
She had all of the authenticity of a $3 bill. She didn't do as many press interviews as she could have. I heard clapping there. Somebody agrees with me. She's raising her hand. I'm pointing her out. Yeah, they could. Well, and America chose a convicted felon over the most inauthentic Democratic candidate I have seen in my life. Because even the felon was pretty authentic. And I have to admit, I hear some chatter back there that they don't. Sorry, Trump is many, many things, but he is not an inauthentic character. You can hate the guy all you want. You can hate what I am saying, but hey, I'm saying it because you asked me my opinion. I'm going to tell you.
Another question from the audience. What has driven the deep separation between the two parties? I guess, I don't know if we have a window now for more unity, or we're just exhausted.
Or, I'm sorry, more unity?
Thank you for the correction, Tom. For some tiny infinitesimal speck of unity.
Yes, because this election was just so unifying, and everybody in this room just seems to be so happy.
Well,
Or exhausted.
if I would just
I'm in a great mood personally.
if I would just stop catastrophizing everything, I think I'd feel a lot better.
Okay, so the questioner wants to know the cause of the separation between the two parties, and I assume implicit in that is how do we get back to more unified thinking in this country, more thinking about common causes and solutions, common ground?
Well, and Ben, maybe to take another flavor on that is, to that point of, do people actually care about policy, and how do you make them care about the details of policy rather than just
Right. I mean, the answer to that question from my conversation with voters is no. They don't care about the policy. They don't care about the details and the nuances. It seems like they're more motivated and interested in the messaging, right? What's the message? What are they saying they're going to do? What are they promising? We don't care so much about the details. It's, do we trust the candidate to follow through, see to it to, carry out the details and enact, an agenda and general goals and policy aims that I agree with.
We have time for one more question here, and the audience question is, do you agree that this election represents a Republican realignment? And if yes, why were the Republicans successful when the Democrats, when you look across to the Bernie Sanders and others, haven't been?
It's not a matter of whether or not the Republican Party is realigned. It's a matter of whether or not the Republican Party has won. And holy crap, did they ever win on Tuesday? Yikes. That's what I have to say.
Closing thoughts, perhaps what you as columnists and reporters at the Gazette will be watching in the coming days, weeks, months as we head toward 2025 and a second Trump administration. What in particular will you be watching?
I think it's mostly going to be cartoons, maybe some movies. I don't think it's going to be, I'll check in once in a while. I mean, probably the inauguration.
Warner Brothers or Disney?
Warner Brothers, like Bugs Bunny.
Me too. I like Warner Brothers.
Yosemite Sam. I'll be watching the stupid politics because I want to be miserable.
All right, let's thank our panelists. Thank you for the great questions. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
You've been listening to highlights from a Pints and Politics event recorded yesterday evening, November 7th, at Big Grove Brewery in Cedar Rapids before a live audience. My co-host was Gazette Executive Editor Zach Kucharski. Our panelists, Gazette journalists Todd Dorman, Althea Cole, and Tom Barton. Danny Gear edited today's program. Sound engineer Jim Davies. Our executive producer is Catherine Perkins. I'm Ben Kiefer. Find out how you can attend future Pints and Politics events at thegazette.com. Thanks for joining us.